All right. Yeah, you know that every time I hear my little alarm thing go off, it brings me back to Yellowstone National Park. I'd never been to Yellowstone. Susan had. I hadn't been, and we took Stella, and because we had the dogs, it was just Stella and I went in to go sit on the benches around the Old Faithful to wait for it to spout, you know. And we were sitting there on the bench, and I had forgot to silence my phone. And whenever something goes wrong at the rink, as an alarm, that siren goes off. Well, about that time, we still had about 10 minutes before the thing was supposed to go off. Everybody was sitting on all the benches, and I was sitting there with Stella. She was only about 4 or 5 years old. Four. And all of a sudden, that alarm went off. And everybody got up. I looked around. Everybody got up. Is it time? Is it time? They all thought it was time for the thing to spout, and I had to turn it off, kind of act like I didn't know what was going on. Anyway, we live in a world right now that's very discouraging. A lot of things look bad. Things look bad. Economy looks bad. Go to the grocery store and try to buy something simple, and you'll discover you might even have to take a loan out to get a loaf of bread. It gets very discouraging. You go to the gas pumps, and one day it's, oh, that's a pretty good price. The next day you go, what happened? It just goes up and down. It's kind of like a yo-yo. Then you look at our government. You look at some of our politicians. You look at the television and watch some of the movements that are going on in today's world, and it's very discouraging. So as we get closer to the last days, you know, we have to ask ourselves the question, how to survive this? What do I do? I mean, you know, you're down in the dumps. Well, you know, Hebrews 12, verses 1 through 3, talks about endurance. It talks about how a runner endures, but it also can make a reference to how the Christian can endure in the last days. And tonight we'll talk about our possible cure for our discouragement in this race that we run in our life. Hebrews 12, 1 through 3 says this, "Wherefore, seeing we are all so encompassed about with such a great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the author, the finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him that endures such contradictions of sinners against himself, lest ye be wearied and faint in your own minds." Now, that is a reference back to chapter 11, which we call the faith chapter. And if you go through that chapter, it talks about all the great heroes of faith that has gone on through the history of the Bible. So, in that regard, we jump to chapter 12, who tells us, since we're surrounded by this great group of people, this is what we need to do. Well, here's a cure, or one possible cure. I imagine there's a lot. But let me give you this illustration first. Hayden Planetarium in New York City ran an advertisement in the New York newspapers inviting those who would like to make the first journey into another planet to submit an application. Within a matter of days, over 18,000 people applied. These applications were given to a panel of psychologists, who upon reviewing them concluded that the vast majority of those who had applied wanted to start a new life on another planet because they were so discouraged by life on this one. Discouragement is something that we all live with from time to time. It is easy for us to allow the pressures and the burdens of life to overwhelm us and cause us to be in deep despair. Actually, discouragement is a killer. Discouragement has caused many people to church. It's caused them to quit on God. It has caused many preachers to give up the fight and lay down their Bibles. Listen to what John Calvin said about his life. In addition to the immense troubles by which I am so sorely consumed, there's almost no day in which some new pain or anxiety does not come. Spurgeon said this. He had to say this about his own battles with discouragement. Discouragement creeps over my heart and makes me go with heaviness to my work. It is dreadfully weakening. And it is that way for many of God's people. Some of you in this very room are discouraged in your walk with the Lord. You might think about throwing in the towel. You might consider dropping out. But before you do, I'll remind you that God did not save you that you could live your life in a state of discouragement. 2 Timothy 1:7 says this, "For God hath not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of sound mind." That verse would seem to indicate that you and I do not have to live with discouragement as our constant companion. Well, the Bible teaches us that it is possible to win the battle over discouragement. God has a plan. He's got a plan for you. He's got a plan for me to help with these debilitating effects of discouragement. In fact, verses that we just read in Hebrews gives us a 3-step plan that will help fight against the stress of discouragement as you walk your race in the Christian life. Let's look at these verses one more time. Let them bring you up out of that valley of discouragement, and let it be a lesson for all of us, maybe even a cure for us for the discouragement that we run or we have when we run this life race. Number one would be commit to a life of faithful running. Well, that requires preparation. No one wakes up in the morning and decides to run a marathon. What kind of race requires, that kind of race, it requires a lot of preparation. I have a cousin who runs marathons. I guess he still runs marathons. I would have never thought he would run marathons. He's as old as I am, but he runs marathons. But you know, you have to prepare for a marathon. But you also have to prepare for your spiritual race. And if we don't run well, then we must prepare properly. A lot of people think that it's just a bed of roses to become a Christian. I heard that over and over again. Oh, just, accept Christ and everything will all be good. Well, it's good. That's not a misnomer. But it's not easy. It's not easy to be a Christian. It's tough. It's not easy to walk the walk and talk the talk. It's tough. You have to work at it. You have to prepare for it. You have to constantly train for it. Why do you think we used to have the Bible studies in every church? Well, not every church. I said that because not every church has Bible studies anymore. Some of them just have worship services. They never have a Bible study anymore. The foregoing of church training. I remember we used to have church training, and it helped us to learn. Well, that's gone. There used to be mission programs for all the kids. You had RAs, GAs, ACTEENs. You had all those kind of programs. Now they've changed some of those, give them different names. But if you go into some of those classes, now some of the traditional churches that are still around, like our church, or probably would still have some of those programs. But the problem is they don't have kids, so they don't have the programs. The other is you'll go into some of those classes in some churches, instead of learning things that they need to know about missions and this and that, they're drinking Kool-Aid and eating cookies and watching some kind of video about some kind of vegetables fighting one another or something. Veggie Tales, I think they call it. And I'm not knocking Veggie Tales, but I'm just saying the teaching of what to do about running the race has pretty much gone out the window. So we need to understand that it's important that if we're going to run this race, if we're going to walk this race, run this race, crawl this race, however you want to do it, you have to prepare for it, and you have to be ready for it. And there's a little 3-step plan here, I think, that would help us do that. All right. I think it'll help you fight against stress. I think it will take you on a new direction. I think, again, it will lift you up out of that valley, that deep, dark valley of distress and upset, being upset and sad. I think it will lift you up. So let's go over those. Number one is, again, I'm repeating myself, but one is commit a faithful life. I said that because number one under that caption is freedom from the weight that encumbers us. Anything that would hinder us from running that race well must be laid aside. Runners will strip away all that is not necessary so they might run the race faster and farther. They get lean, they get light so they can run to win their race. Anything that has more of you than Jesus has to go if you're really wanting to run well. Whatever has your attention, your time, your resources, your strength, it is a weight in your life. And it has to be laid aside if you're going to run well. If it isn't dealt with, it will cause you to become discouraged. Second under that topic is freedom from the sins that entangle. The picture here is that of an athlete stripping himself down so that he can run well. In fact, the ancient Greek games, they all ran nude. Wouldn't that be great for ABC's Wide World of Sports? I don't think they had that anymore. They shed everything they can so they can run the race without entanglements. Well, today's runners do the same thing. And if you're going to watch the upcoming Olympics, and you'll just see some of those runners, they look almost naked. Some of them, I think, pretty close to it. But that's because they're trying to have everything on them that is light as possible, that will not cause them to be slow in their achievements. But again, it also speaks of Christians running the race well. Did you know that after you get saved, you still sin? What? Yeah, you will still sin. You will still desire evil. In fact, one of the biggest shocks of the Christian life is how easily you can sin after you have been saved. Certain words may slip out every now and then. That old anger may flare up out of control now and then. Your attitude might get rotten from time to time. Being saved doesn't prevent you from sinning, but your sinning does prevent you from running the race well. We are told here that those besetting sins, those things that are a particular problem for us as individuals, must be dealt with. We are to remove ourselves from their presence, get away from the places where they take place, guard ourselves against their attack. We have to get serious and honest about our sins that will affect us as believers. I'll use this illustration because at one time I was a mechanic. I heard an old mechanic that got saved. Heard of an old mechanic got saved. Now, he had a foul mouth before he met Jesus. And after he was saved, he was still having a problem with his language. He talked to his preacher about the problem, and the preacher came up with a plan. He said, every time you feel like using profanity, just sing a hymn instead. A few days later, the preacher stopped by this man's shop to see how things were going. He asked, hey, brother, how's it going? Oh, pretty good, said the man. But I've sung every hymn I know today, and I've made up 3 or 4 of them. Well, that shows the problem that we have with sin. But God can help us conquer if we are sincere and will trust Him to help us. He will give you victory over the things that hinder your race in life. Don't let anxieties of life and entanglements of sin cause you to become discouraged in your race for Jesus. Also, we said it requires preparation. It requires patience. We are told to run the race with patience, the race which is set before us. We are said to be in a race. The word means a struggle or a contest. Our English word agony comes from the Greek word that means race. Sometimes life is good. The road is smooth. The way is easy. But there are other times when it feels like you're running blindfold or you're uphill through a minefield. Seems like there are times when life is a struggle. It is an agony. It is a misery. You go out to your truck and it doesn't start. Oh, man. Those are times that you need to call for patience. Of course, God never said it'd be easy. In truth, He said just the opposite. If you want to live a Christian life, you're going to go through some trials and tribulations. The word patience means endurance. It means settling in for a long haul. It carries the idea of commitment to the race in spite of the obstacles or the difficulties that may be in front of you. We are not running a short dash. We are running a marathon. Don't be a little pop, a little flash, a little burst of excitement, and then nothing. Don't be an Alka-Seltzer Christian. Plop, plop, fizz, fizz. Oh, what a relief it is. And then nothing. You got to be steady. If you're a teacher, you be steady. If you're a preacher, you be steady. If you're a prayer warrior, a witness, a church member, you have to be steady. Run your race and settle in for the long haul. Make up your mind to be committed to that race. Make up your mind that nothing will prevent you from running a good, patient race for the glory of God. Secondly, we need to commit a life to a focused running. As we run the race, we are to keep ourselves focused. We are to concentrate on the things that will prevent us from becoming discouraged as we run that race. The writer tells us what those things are. Number one, focus on the person of Jesus. Looking unto Jesus, the author, the finisher of our faith. That's how Christian life began. It began with a look. Looking got us into the race, and keeping our eyes on Him keeps us to do well as we run the race. Notice the phrase in verse 1, the race that is set before us. It seems, to me, it indicates that we run each race on our own. I can't run your race. You can't run my race. Now, if I spent my time looking at you and how well you're doing, I'm liable to become discouraged on my own race. I might become defeated because I'm not doing as well as you are. Then I might try to run in your lane. Or I might stumble over pride. That word, pride, if I begin to think that I'm doing better than you. Or I might even get discouraged if I think that the way you're running has an effect on my own race. If I allow your failures and stumbles to hinder me, in other words, if I keep my eyes on you and how you're running, I'm in trouble. The only way that anyone can run well is to keep our eyes focused on Jesus. He's the only one we have to run for. He is the race judge. He's the author, the finisher of our faith. He gives out the rewards, and He also disqualifies the runners. He calls the race, And He is the one, the only one, to watch as the race progresses. Get your eyes off the other racers and how they're doing, and get your eyes on Jesus and Jesus alone, and you will run a better race. Focus also on the performance of Jesus. Not only should we keep our eyes on the Lord's person as we run, but also on His performance. He finished our race for us. As we run the race of life, let us take courage in the fact that Jesus has already passed this way. He ran the race ahead of us and has completed His race. In doing so, He completed ours as well. That means that as we run and face the pressures of life, we have Him to help us along the way. He knew His share of trials in the race of life, and He successfully navigated that course. And let's go through some of the things that He endured. He was born in a stable. He was born to poor parents. His life was threatened as a baby. His birth was the cause of terrible suffering. He was moved as a baby. He was raised in a despicable town. His father died when he was young. We don't know exactly what age Joseph died, but he was young. He had to support his family. He had no home, no place to lay his head. He was hated and opposed by others. He was charged with insanity. He was charged with demon possession. He was opposed by his family. He was rejected, hated, opposed by the audience who came to hear him speak. He was betrayed by a close friend. He was left alone, rejected, and forsaken by all his friends. He was tried before the high court in the land and tried with treason. He was executed as a common criminal by means of crucifixion. He has been through it all, and He is the perfect coach for us who are running the race. So instead of looking everywhere else for help, you need to find your help in Jesus and in Him alone. I like this one. He also fixed our race for us. Jesus has not only run the race, our race, but He has fixed it so you can't lose. He has already won the victory, and He shares that with us. He has already fixed the end of the race and has assured all of His children that they will arrive safely at home. This thing's fixed. I'm already a winner in the race of life. I already have a victory. All He asks me to do is keep my eyes on Him and run my race with patience. Not in competition with you or anybody else. This is my race. I've already won. All that remains is just to finish my course. However, I want to do well, and I know you do too, so that I can say the same thing Paul said at the end of his own race when he said this, 2 Timothy 4:7, I have fought the good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. And finally, we need to commit to a life of fulfilled running. I seem like I always do things in threes, but I'm going to share three brief truths that will maybe make this a reality for you. Number one is the fulfillment of remembering. When discouragement brings, or actually when discouragement comes into your life, you need to remember that Jesus died for us. To think that He would do that for you, do that for me, is evidence of His love for us and of His work in our lives. And I'm going to remind you that Jesus is always in your corner and you have nothing to fear. Romans 8 tells us, what shall we say then of these things? If God be for us, who can be against us? Second, the fulfillment of reward. Jesus has run His race and paved the way for you and myself. He has already assumed His place at the Father's right hand. He sat down there, signifying that His work of salvation was finished forever. His heaven is our heaven. His place of reward is our reward. He promised us that He would make a place for us there, that He would return to take us home again one of these days. That is enough sunshine on a cloudy day. Therefore, instead of being discouraged as we run our race, always remember that it is not in vain. There is a fulfillment of knowing that God is keeping records and that one day He will reward those who have run the race faithfully. Third, the fulfillment of resting. Even as we run the race, there are times when our steps grow heavy and our pace seems to slow down. We get a little weary. However, let us remember that we are not home yet. There's a rest for the people of the Lord. There will come a day when we can lay our burdens down from our shoulders and sit at the feet of the Master. There will come a day when He will wipe away the tears of sorrow and exhaustion that's in our eyes. So let us remember that this life is not the place of rest for the servants of the Lord. It is a place of labor and faithful service. Therefore, do not grow weary in well-doing. One day we will join Jesus by that great river of life, and we will be able to rest in His presence from the burdens and the heartaches and the discouragements of this life. It is possible to rest, though. Let me get too far down here. It is possible to rest in this life, even though we're running the race, but how do we do that? By keeping the focus on Jesus and by learning to abide in His will. He will let you run that race that will leave you fulfilled and will leave you rested. And again, finally, don't let discouragement get you down. If you're battling that tonight, let Him refocus your priorities. Lighten your load. Equip you with all that you need to patiently run that race. And run that race for His glory. There is always going to be help in Him. So don't leave this place tonight without turning all those things over to Him. Don't leave with anything on your shoulders tonight that will weigh you down. Don't leave anything there that will cause you to stumble or fall. He will take care of it.